It's great to be here. And thanks, Marco, for inviting me. For those who don't know me, I'm Matthias, one of the partners at Energy Impact Partners. And in short, we're an investment platform, 3 billion under management, and really custom-made for climate tech investments. I'm grateful, Marco, for you inviting me. And I'm even more grateful for you building that ecosystem that we have here today. Because it really does need an ecosystem to fight climate change. Let's maybe take a step back. So I'm trained as an engineer, I'm a venture capitalist, so I believe in two things. I do believe in innovation, and I do believe in collaboration. Right? And if we take another step back, if we look at the history of mankind, it really is interesting, because it is basically a function of innovation and energy. If you look at how we've done as a species, it's quite a successful journey. It's actually quite incredible. And I mean it in the most positive sense of the word. Right? Today, we have more people that are better off than ever before. And again, funnily enough, it has really been a function of access to energy. There's one very important example that many of you know. Those are people that invented how to make synthetic fertilizers. It's basically you trade energy and you get more food, right? And I mean, there's different numbers, but roughly like 3.5 billion people today can be sustained because we have synthetic fertilizers. So that's a great success story, right? I think we can be, as mankind, we can be super proud. Unfortunately, all of that, most of that energy, most of that progress we made has been fueled by fossil fuels in the past. And that's just not sustainable. Still, I'm an optimist. Still, I'm an engineer. Still, I'm a venture capitalist. So I think we should keep the innovation part. We need to innovate. We need to be very innovative to find and use energy. The only thing we have to change is we have to swap out the fossil fuel piece for clean energy. And there's good news, because I'm not the only one anymore, as we see in this room, but also as we can see by the numbers. Climate tech investing has really become a major trend. And that's a trend that won't go away anytime soon, because there's very fundamental macro drivers behind all that investment. And Klaus already mentioned there is the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, hundreds of billions put behind clean energy. There's equivalent models in the European Green Deal. There's commitments by large companies to get to net zero. There is a lot of things happening that can make us very optimistic that climate tech is here to stay. And there's one more, probably even more important reason than all those commitments, why we are very convinced that climate tech will be a very strong category for the years to come. And that is, it just makes financial sense, right? So at Energy Impact Partners, we track what we call the EIP Climate Index, and it's a bucket of publicly listed companies. We track them against the stock market, and you can see it has been consistently performing better than the average market. Sometimes better, sometimes worse. You see here some of the probably bubble that we had middle of last year, but still, as a category, it has done really well. Good. But not good enough, unfortunately, because we're still not on a pathway to 1.5 degrees. So we need to up our game. And so what we try to do as a platform, we try to see where can we have the biggest impact. And if you look at that chart, it's quite stunning to see there's just 2-3 industries. If you help them to reduce their carbon emission, it has massive impact. And it's energy, obviously, which we've been built around initially. It is mobility. So that's really a fundamental, a very obvious thing to change. One could be slightly depressed if you look at the green bars, which is the percentage of companies that have, in that sector, have committed to science-based targeted initiative, meaning they have committed to a 1.5 degree scenario. But I think that conclusion would be wrong, and I'll tell you why. Because if you look like just one level deeper, like for a given industry, in our case, the energy industry, you find like many large industrial companies that have made lots of progress and are very active and really like front runners in transitioning their companies and helping the entire industry to transform. And so what we did as, again, to get the biggest scale for our impact, we brought the most forward-thinking of those large multi-billion-dollar companies together in our coalition, right? And it has been a very powerful tool for us as a platform, but also like for the industries, right? Because I personally think innovation is not a zero-sum game, right? Innovation is all about reducing the risk of adopting innovation at scale, right? So if you, as a large industrial player, if you do some sparring with your peers, if you compare notes, like what new technologies work, you're just better off, right? And also like the startups are better off because they have, certainly in the energy sector, they need the industrial players to scale faster. So that's a very important element of our little platform that we're very proud of, but it's only one part, only one element of the equation. The other part is our startups, obviously, and there's only a few on this slide, but over our entire platform, we have a good 100 startup companies that we have invested behind. And so our job is really that of a catalyst. Like we, as a firm, are the catalyst between our large industrial partners and the small startups we have invested behind. And that's where the magic happens. And it's not very easy. It took us quite a bit of effort to build that engine. And actually, it takes quite a bit of people. Like, I think we have 12 people. And their only job is to find the meaningful relationships between large corporates, small startup. And that's very important, because if all the 100 startups were talking to all like 50 corporates, it would be a big mess. And it would be very inefficient, too. And again, many large corporates love talking to startups. Doesn't mean they necessarily buy their products. So really try to cut through all that noise and find those relationships that actually result in business. And we've been reasonably successful, right? Over time, we generated $1.4 billion worth of commercial business, contracts, revenues between those two parties. And it's kind of an abstract number, but if you think like a European startup finding their first rollout customers in that large LP base of ours, you'll see that can make all the difference, right? A big contract in a new geography with a partner that has a strong reputation and can serve as a reference, that can really change and transform a company. So that's kind of what we do. That's our role in the middle. So I think we have good data sets ourselves, like by being in the middle of that industry. So it makes it very easy for us to like look at fundamental data and match fundamental trends with the right startup companies. I'll give you just a few examples really quick. So if you see how consumers, how house owners are voting with their wallets, everybody is now trying to get solar panels on their roof, right? And I did. But the good news is there's almost for everything, there's technology today, right? So there's a company called Solar, which actually makes it very simple for consumers. Buy a solar system online, get it installed with no hassle. Another thing we're very happy to see is all the renewable generation assets that are being built out these days, which is good. That's exactly what we need. Unfortunately, it's still a big construction site for every project. And as you know how construction sites are, like many of them are mostly run by diesel generators to power all the equipment. And that's not very sustainable. So luckily, again, there's always technologies to fix things. There's a company called InstaGrid, which is basically providing mobile batteries to replace diesel generators. And then last but not least, it's actually great to see for me as a European that for a change, maybe Europe is leading the charge in electric vehicle adoption, right? And you see the numbers, and if you look at like individual countries like Norway, it's even more stunning. It's like 90% of all new cars probably in Norway are electric vehicles. And that is great. That is great, obviously, because it gets emissions off the road, literally. But it's also very important for the overall power system, because those batteries, if they act in sync, could be a very necessary addition to balance the power grid, because we need more balancing in the power grid that is more and more depending on somewhat fluctuating generation, like solar and wind. So that's great, and again, there's technologies to fix everything. In that case, there's a company that's called EV.energy. It's basically a layer that makes charging easier for consumers, and at the same time gives large energy system players access to that flexibility. So you could think of all the cars on the road like a gigantic battery on wheels, or like a equivalent to various hydropower stations, and that can really help balance the power system. And good thing, because the story has gone full circle. That company of ours, EV Energy, is actually working with lots of the large companies we have in our industrial coalition, and really through that collaboration has scaled really fast over the last coming years. So they're now active in Europe, in the United States, and Australia, and really connecting flexibility from electric vehicles into the power system. So I think we have all the reasons to be optimistic, really. Money is coming our way for climate tech. There's lots of innovation. I think the only thing we need to do, we need to step up our game in collaboration. And that's why we're here, I guess, and that's what we really should embrace at that conference, but like generally across our industries. Let's collaborate more, join a coalition, share innovation, share your experience with what works and what doesn't, then we're all better off. Thank you.